All right, we've hit that magic number of 100, so we're going to get started. Welcome to everyone. This is the CDSS program Common Time. This is our inaugural program, and I'm delighted to see you all here this evening. Before we get started with our presentation and I give you a little introduction, first some general Zoom housekeeping items. I know you've heard these many, many times before. One more time will not hurt. All of you are on mute. You are in control of that, but please do keep yourselves on mute during the whole presentation. If you're having any technical issues or if you have any questions for our tech side of things or for the panelists, please do find the chat feature of Zoom and write in your questions if there's something that we can help you with immediately. I am assisted by Crispin Youngberg, so either Crispin or I will help you with those, and we'll save all of your questions for the panelists until the very end. A couple of things that you should know. First of all, this presentation is being recorded. If you are uncomfortable with being recorded for your picture to be seen, you might want to turn your video off. But many people have asked for a copy of the recording because they were unable to attend this evening. So we will make this recording available to folks afterward. Also, we are taking some photographs of the Zoom screens just for our publicity purposes and for archival purposes. So again, please feel free to turn your video off if you are uncomfortable being photographed. Following the presentation, I will send you all a link to a recording, the one that we're recording this evening, and just a little evaluation because we'd love to capture your thoughts about the program tonight and about what else you would like to see in a future iteration of this series, Common Time. So what is this series all about anyway? What are we doing here? Well, as we've gotten started having programs at CDSS, other than in the summer, there are so many ideas floating around, so many excellent discussion topics, things that are really worthy of 90 minutes of your time that are from all across our program areas. And so this program, Common Time, is an opportunity to talk about a lot of these different things. And we're starting off tonight with a panel of callers. And here's what we're going to think about for this evening. So imagine a time that I hope is in the not too distant future when public dances have restarted. So your dance group has already made the decision to start having dances, and as a caller, you have made the decision to start calling again. That's in your comfort zone. Now what happens? As a caller, what do you need to do to get ready for that? Are you ready for that? What have you been doing this whole 15 months to get ready for that, to think about that? And where will the dancers be? What will dancers need once we resume calling? So that's the moment that we're in for this presentation right now. And we have this great group of callers to talk about this. I'm going to introduce them to you. First, I want to introduce Ben Sachs-Hamilton. Ben has called a lot up and down the Northeast corridor and has called a lot for the LGBTQ community. So Ben, thank you for joining us for Common Time today. Also joining us from the Atlanta area is Cis Hinkle. Cis is a Contra and English caller. From the West Coast, we have Kalia Kliban, who calls primarily English, but a little bit of Contra. And she's been instrumental in starting one of the early pandemic Zoom series called Odd Sundays with Sharon Green. And finally, last but not least, everywhere where you do contra dancing and squares, Lisa Greenleaf, based in the Boston area. Thank you all for being here this evening. We're going to jump right into our content. And I want to start for each of our panelists. I have a question for you. So the question is, what have you been doing as part of your calling career during these months that we've been at home? So Cis, I'm going to start with you. And I think you might want to take yourself off of mute.
Yeah, we said that. How often are we going to have to say you're muted?
Always.
This entire evening. Sorry about that. Anyway, during the pandemic, I spent the first 3 months kind of under the bed, being a little overwhelmed by everything. But most of what I've been doing started being involved with the Atlanta Disc Dance, the every Friday night event that we put on, that a subset of the Atlanta group put on, Seth Tepfer and myself and some other folks. And that pulled me out of the hole I had crawled into, and then started calling a few other places around, and then began to get very interested and enthused by the new creative choreography that people were coming up with to make online dancing more fun. So that's pretty much what I've been up to in the calling realm.
Great. Ben, how about you?
Yeah, so I feel when we were meeting to plan this event, I felt like the odd one out in that I've done basically no online dancing or calling. I fall into the camp of folks who that just hasn't held a lot of appeal. And so I think I've put more of my energy into maintaining community in other ways. So for example, when we found out that we couldn't have our annual fall dance camp for the Lavender Country and Folk Dancers, LCFD, we put together a whole weekend of programming that we had a virtual dance, but we also had some discussion sessions, we had a variety show, and I really enjoyed thinking about how to continue to not just maintain, but also build community and take advantage of having some time not dancing to deepen community and ask important questions that will be helpful to have talked about going forward.
Great, thanks. Lisa, what about you?
Well, first, I was lucky enough to be a part of CDSS American Week at Pinewoods via Zoom, and that was my introduction to Zoom. And boy, was it great because it showed all of the possibilities. But then during the fall, it was tough because my internet was so bad. So I could be a participant, and I loved concerts. My favorite part, of course, was the chat window because you could feel like an 8th grader in the balcony texting with your friends. But then I really was missing calling, the actual calling. So that was the impetus to upgrade my internet. So I started a little late in January, joining the virtual Contra scene. And like Cis, what really helped was we all started writing dances for 1 or 2 people, or for 2 couples. And that was so creative and it was so much fun. And so then I was able to call for dances like that. And that has made all the difference. Even squares, my friend, Cis and I called squares, was really great for dancers' neurons. You are couple number 3. So it was a lot of fun. And I can't wait to get back to 4 couples in a square.
Right. Kalia, what about you?
Well, Sharon Green and I started calling pretty early in mid-April of last year. After a couple of, I think it was with Andrew Swain and Daisy Black, they had like this little pandemic pub session. It was just, playing tunes and chatting with a few people on Zoom. And then, just in their living room, oh, let's call a dance. And they did something, and I called Mulberry Garden, and it was like total shambles, but kind of fun. And then I think Sharon was at one of those things, and we started to talk, and we just basically slid into the same time slot as my regular Sunday dance, which is 1st, 3rd, and 5th Sundays. And it turned out to be a good slot, and she and I have just kept that going for over a year, which is kind of mind-boggling. So in addition to regular calling online, the process of figuring out which dances will adapt well, and I think just because of the nature of the form, English adapts a little bit more smoothly than Contra does, and the subset of dances that are really quite well adaptable for being done by 1 or 2 dancers seems to keep growing in some amazing ways. And it's been fun to watch that as my comfort level with calling online grows. And I've also been doing a lot of repertoire acquisition, you know, waiting for those days when I can actually call with live dancers again. So, you know, the dance books keep coming. I keep adding stuff to the files. I've been doing some kind of data nerd stuff, trying to get, you know, 20 years of logs caught up. So there's been time for sort of data and catching up, but mostly I've just been focused on online calling and looking at teasing out the little narrative threads from a big complex wad of dance. It's been an interesting process.
So one of the things I find really interesting about this span of time is how what we consider to be our community has shifted a little bit, because these online communities have really sprung up in many places. So the next question I have for all of you is thinking about your home dance community, or whatever you consider to be your home dance community. Has that community decided to make any changes to the way dancing happens, or are there any changes you as a caller want to try to introduce to your community once we're back going? Ben, how about you? Why don't you start?
Yeah, I've been, as I said, thinking a lot about developing community during this time, and one of the things I'm looking forward to in coming back to dancing after this break is revisiting with fresh eyes some of the assumptions and some of the norms that we have in our dance communities. And I think this is actually a great opportunity to institute some changes around safety, around respect, around consent, terminology, things that dance organizers may have been thinking about doing for a while but weren't sure when is the right time. I think this might be the right time to make some of those changes. And I think it dovetails really well, actually, with a lot of people as they come back into dancing are going to be thinking about safety from a contagious disease perspective. And there's a real opportunity to link that to other kinds of safety and think about how we can make our dances and our communities safer in lots of different ways.
So how about any of the others? Or do you know if your communities are thinking about any changes as we go back? Yes, Cis, go ahead.
Yeah, it's hard to speak for. I'm in an interesting place because I'm on the steering committee for the Atlanta Dance Group, but the group that's been putting on the online dances, and also some other getting ready for some private party coming back and dancing in person, is not. I'm the only one there that's on the dance committee for the Atlanta group, and there are very few people from the Atlanta community who have been attending our Friday night online dances. Of the 100 and however many we might have had 5 people from Atlanta. So our community for online has been a much wider community, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens to the local community when we get back. And some of the things that I would like to institute, I've been thinking about it, Ben, like you were talking about, hoping to take this chance to introduce some like new terminology, perhaps for roles, or trying to break us of the habit of every single dance has to have 2 swings and it has to be a contra and this and that and the other, to introduce a little variety like we used to have back when I started dancing back in the dark ages, just to see if we can kind of retrain our dance group to appreciate many, many styles. So the question is whether I will even get buy-in from the rest of my actual steering committee, much less that whatever dance community that returns. So I have my own personal agendas, but we'll see what happens locally as far as the community goes.
I got mine. We've been together our second time yesterday third Sunday English Regency dancing.
So Laura, I'm actually going to stop you because this is just for the panelists for the moment, but we'll definitely answer some of your questions at the end, but thank you. It's important, I think, to think about what you personally want to do as a caller versus what does your local organization want to do and how those things might coincide or not, right? So that's going to be always interesting to think about. Lisa, I think you had your hand up briefly.
Well, I was just going to think about, we're going to have to look and see what the makeup of the community is, because we're always going to be looking for new dancers. Is that going to be a bigger issue for us when we return? And how many months are we going to know? Okay, it's really time to do the push. But also, as Ben said, I hope organizations and communities look at their social friendliness. Yeah, there's some things I would love to see happen at my local dance community, but it really depends who's there. I think we have a golden 2 or 3 months, folks. And if organizers talk with callers and really get it out there and role model the behavior you want, it can happen.
Definitely. We'll touch more on a few community issues. No, Kaylee, go ahead.
I have to agree with that we have this unprecedented opportunity to shift some things that were previously, but this is what we do every month. It's like, no, there is no every month right now. We can make these changes. It is a rare opportunity. What we make of it is I don't know, we'll find out. I mean, for me, my local dance community, it's been in hibernation. I have no idea what it's going to be like when we come back to live dancing. So it's going to be very, very much a matter of staying flexible and responsive and just watching what happens on the floor. But again, as you said, I think this is a great time for callers and organizers and managers to start talking together and saying, what's on the wish list? What do we keep wanting to do, but we've never quite been able to slip it in there? This is the moment. And Lisa, I think you're right that we got to do this in the first few months, or we're going to lose the spot.
All right, so I want to invite our 4 panelists to have a little bit of a conversation. Here's the first thing that I want you to think about is, what do you as a caller need to do to get ready for this beautiful moment that we hope is coming really soon, returning to in-person calling? All right, Kalia, off you go.
Something that came home to me pretty hard was that my voice is out of shape. I have lost all my calluses. It's normally, those of you who do this a lot, you call for a week and you're a little tired, but that's fine. I did the Heather and Rose online weekend, and the Saturday was 2 workshops and an evening dance. And I felt like I'd been gargling tacks at the end of it. It was amazing. So we're all going to have to be very gentle with not only our dancers, but ourselves. Use the mics, go easy on your voices. We've all got muscles to rebuild.
I think I've already started to work on this because I will be at Pinewoods this summer. I got to tell you, I was looking at old programs and dances that were called at many a dance weekend. I think that has a hey in it. And I had to laugh because I don't remember all of them. And so it's going to be rediscovering all those luscious Bob Isaacs dances I have not been able to call. I can't wait to look at them. And I'm going to have to practice. I've had to practice for online dancing too. Practice teaching, actually. And who knows, maybe even practice cueing. I don't think that will be as much of a problem. But also, number one, to talk to the organizers. What are your expectations? Are they in line with what I think can happen? I mean, that's always an interesting conversation. We just want to hit them, go right for it. And we're going to do a no walkthrough dance number 4. I would say kindly, well, I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready for that no walkthrough yet, even though people have been dancing online. I think that's part of the problem, is understanding for those of us who've been calling online. It's actually been a pretty small community. It's been a great community, but it's smaller than what we're probably going to start to encounter. So pace yourself. And one of the things we were all laughing about is online, you do have to keep queuing, because without another physical reference there, dancers can't always remember the pattern. Is that going to be the case when you're calling live? Maybe sometimes yes, and maybe sometimes no. Maybe it's just saying now every, 64 beats. I don't know. So it's going to be, the pay attention muscles are going to get worked.
Definitely. I just recently got booked to call a dance in September and was specifically asked to keep calling all the way through dances. I'm not sure. That's a long way off. We might have some conversations between now and then, but yeah, I think that's definitely something that's on people's minds. Something I've been thinking about, what I'm going to need to do is think about what are the things that I want to be teaching mixed in with and in between the dance figures themselves. What are the skills and how to be a helpful neighbor on the dance floor, and the technique points and safety points that I always try to work those into my teaching, but one, I'm out of practice, and two, I bet if I really worked on it, I could do a lot better than I did before, and that's my goal.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cis, go ahead.
I was going to say, I actually have, as I was telling the folks before everyone got here, I actually called a live dance yesterday. That was a private party, pre-registered, all vaccinated, whatever. But it was interesting. I got to test some of these muscles of mine and of the dancers. And I was wondering if I would remember not to call all the way through because of doing a lot of online calling. And it turned out that I was able to drop out, and I didn't actually have to kick myself in the rear to remember to do that, and was able to do it when people could put up with it. So bottom line is, I went to my dance database and organized it by number of times ever called, and picked some of the most familiar dances so that they were familiar to me and familiar to probably to the group that was there. And that made it a whole lot easier for all of us. So I think that will be part of my strategy, getting back into calling live in the future as well.
Kalia.
I had been planning on doing exactly that. We've got a log spreadsheet for our local dance, and I was just going to sort by, occurrence and say, all right, what's our top 30? Let's build a program from there. The real local favorites, because people are going to have a lot on their minds. That's not just, which way do I go? But, it's, oh my God, I haven't seen you forever. Oh, and turn right. So yeah, if they don't have to think too hard, I think that'll be a help. And familiarity, I think, is going to be comforting.
So one of the themes that I've heard echoing through some of the things that you've said, and echoes something that I'm thinking about, is as callers, we have to also think about what we need and what we can do in addition to what the dancers need. So what dances will you choose to program that may be a little easier for you to call, that you remember how to do, which may or may not be the same thing as what dancers need? So that's some interesting thing to think about. And will the dancers understand and appreciate, hopefully, that the callers are working to get back up to speed just as at the same time they are? So that's something that's in the thought process for me too. But I definitely want to switch to that dancer mode and all of your perceptions of where do you think the dancers are and what will they need when they come back. And part of that is a community question, and part of that is a dance skill question. So Lisa, why don't we start with you?
Well, yeah, they're going to need time to talk. Also, I think it's important, depending on what your crowd is. For example, I know I'm about to do a local dance weekend where maybe Contra isn't the #1 activity people like to do. So I've got to sell it. And I think part of selling it for me is to remind them, do what you're comfortable with. If you do not want to swing, you can do a 2-hand turn. Here's how you do it. You balance, you keep your hands down, and you smile. And the person will be receptive. And I've asked the organizers, please remind people that it's okay to wear a mask, that it's okay not to swing if you don't want to. And I'm going to start off with a different kind of repertoire than I might normally, just to see how people are doing. I think swinging is going to be hard. A 12 count, 16 count swing is going to be hard. So as Cis said, oh my gosh, it's time to get those one swing dances out. I don't think I have them anymore, but but I know where to find them. So things like that. And again, folks, that's where squares are your friends. Also, look at the opportunity now for a lot of odd formations, for triplets. Perfect. They don't last as long. People will be appreciative. And just, good calling skills, paying attention to the fact that, oh, we need to rewalk that past the ocean. Oh, we actually need to reteach that past the ocean, and to be positive and happy about it. I think that's where I am.
So several things were in that statement. One is reteaching some dance skills that people may have forgotten, right? Maybe more than one walkthrough, maybe 3 walkthroughs. And also programming might change in the beginning. So who else can comment on that? What do you think will be different about your dance programming once we get back to in-person dancing?
I mean, I think a lot of the things that people are mentioning take time. And so with more time on teaching, with potentially longer breaks for people to hug and cry and whatever they need to do, it's probably going to be fewer dances. Now, we also might be running the dances a little shorter, so that can compensate a little bit. But I wouldn't be surprised if there are just fewer dances in an evening, at least to start out with.
Along that vein, one of the things that I've been thinking, we're actually looking at getting started in our area, and for at least the first few, I'm planning on having 2 breaks. That's going to give people a little more of a breather, more social time, and just it breaks the program into smaller chunks. Helps us get all of ourselves back up and running. And in pretty much any program that I do, there's usually a build of skills, sort of assuming the brand new beginners at the dance, kind of getting them up and running. But I think dances that reinforce the basics in an entertaining way are probably going to be very useful for the next few months, getting just, re-emphasizing the basics while we're all getting back on our feet.
Cis, go ahead.
I think one of the things that's going to be different about programming, for me at least, what I found yesterday was I did run shorter dances, and when I looked back at my program, I ended up doing as many dances in the evening as I might usually at a regular 3-hour dance, but they were much shorter and there were longer breaks in the middle and less, a lot of chatting and all that sort of thing. But in the old days, I had a pretty standard sequence of, I have a circle here and I might do a square here and that sort of thing. But I'd like to, as Lisa was saying, introduce more variety of formations, perhaps in our mostly contracentric crowd, bring in some English. So figuring out where in the program those all might fit appropriately is going to be a new programming skill for me that I can tell already that I'm going to need to put some thought into. And building skills in a perhaps more in a contra that would then be used in an English dance or vice versa. which is not something that I've had to do in the past.
Two other thoughts about programming. One is, I think, we're all, as callers, we're going to have to be incredibly flexible and have, not just plan B, but plan C, D, and E, depending on how the evening goes and what kind of crowd shows up and what their energy is and what their comfort levels are. Another thing is, I think, some extra attention paid to what we typically will call like the beginner lesson at the beginning of the evening, but which I imagine now might be more of a beginner/refresher lesson. And how does that look different if that's the goal of it?
Definitely. I think that flexibility is very interesting. And some of the things that have come up really speak again to callers working with organizers. How long should the evening go? Should there be 2 breaks? Should we change the beginner lesson to refresh, restart for everybody? And what will that be? And so those are decisions I think that we as callers don't get to make in a vacuum, but again, speaks to how we have to communicate with organizers to either suggest some of these things or ask what plans have you made to change some of your format. I think that's really important too. One question that has come up, it was in one of the questions somebody wrote on the registration form, and I think it's in the chat also, is what do you think about dance tempos? How do you think dance tempos should change or shouldn't change once we go back?
Wow, that's a question with the band. They might be raring to go. I have to say they have been wonderful. For those of you who have not been dancing online, the people who came before me, Cis and Don Mino and folks like that, figured out that tempo has to be slower. Many people are dancing on carpet or they don't have a lot of room. So a usual New England tempo might be 117 or 118 beats per minute. It got slowed down to 112. And then gradually it has sped up to maybe 115, 116. So, that's a great question, Joanna, because I work with some bands that I know I can't slow down. And all that means is 2 more. And they might look at me funny and I'll just say, sorry, I'm not going to tell them you're playing too fast unless they're playing too fast. But I kind of look forward to getting back to normal tempo. And, speaking about people's muscles and exhaustion factor, I did hear from a good friend who said, I felt fine during the dancing the day after I was wiped. So those of you doing weekends, keep that in mind.
So what are other thoughts about tempo? Somebody said to me when I was talking about this topic that, some dancers will appreciate a slower tempo and some dancers are really raring to go right now, which says to me, people are coming back to dancing from all different places. What are we going to do about that? How are we going to handle that? What do you think? Kalia?
There's one thing that we haven't had much of, if any, over the last year, which is hand contact and solid connection and weight. And, things like a circle left once round. You kind of have to support yourself. You don't have that elastic, conjoined, zip. And dances that really highlight that connection and what you can do when you're solidly attached to another dancer, I think that's going to be especially satisfying. And there are things that we've been dancing in solo that just, okay, it works. But if you can get the hands back into it, I think people will really appreciate stepping on the gas a little bit and just having that wonderful feeling again of a strong 2-hand turn or swing or circle or whatever it is, but that the connected moves, they can be a little faster, and I think it's going to be wonderful. And then, maybe a nice slow one to let people, turn less pink afterwards.
I mean, to me, this is basic. This is still calling, not 101, maybe 102, is that you're paying attention to how people are moving. And you can tell if you're watching, this dance needs to go faster. Or you already know from experience that there's this beautiful dance that works well to a moody minor or a pretty jig, and you want something spacious. And the dancers will fill up that time and that space in a way that they find satisfying. But I agree with Kalia, a nice mix, because I really want to honor the bands.
Yeah, I agree. And the mix is really excellent. And this is a question that we have had to deal with even in the before times. If it's really, really hot, we might want to run shorter and not quite so fast. Or, if depending on the crowd, like everyone's been saying, you can tell if people are really raring to go, perhaps, or need a break, and let's do one of those nice slow ones.
One of the things that comes up for me as an English dance caller, where we want a lot of flexibility, is think about how do you communicate with your band? Because in the English world, I'm writing a program ahead of time and I'm giving it to my band, hopefully ahead of time. Now, what do you do with your programming? So again, that's a sort of a discussion about flexibility and communication that has to happen ahead of time too.
I'd like to point out Bob Isaacs. I'm so glad you're out there. He pointed out in the chat something really important, that some dancers may have lost their dizziness immunity. So we have to be aware of this anyway. And sometimes it can be a challenge for contra dance callers because there's so many great dances and they're clockwise. So those first couple of programs you do, wow, change it up, change it up, change it up.
Great.
Yeah, I haven't been able to really pay attention to the chat, but every time I glance over there, there's really interesting stuff. So I'm looking forward to snagging that, and I'll read through it later. But yeah, there's a lot of wonderful ideas going by there.
And that clockwise thing is one of the things that was really something on my mind even before the pandemic, because I have a hip that lets me know if we've been too clockwise for too long. So I've been evaluating my dances differently than I used to for those beautiful dances that are circle, swing, circle, allemande, right, et cetera, to try and, like you say, change it up. And I also remember many a time looking at beginners, if I was out there dancing with them with their eyes going round and round in their heads, because we just had two balance and swings in that last dance that they learned. So anyway, enough on that.
So here's a question for all of you. Thinking about specific dance figures, whether it's English or contra, what do you think you might need to work the most on that people will have either forgotten how to do or forgotten style, technique? And what are the specific figures that you either might want to suggest adaptations for because people might feel reluctant coming back after the pandemic? Or, we're going to work our way up to this until it feels comfortable to touch people in this way. So what are some ideas you have there? Ben, how about you?
Well, I mean, like Lisa said earlier, I think the swing is going to be one of the biggest questions. And fortunately, we have a wealth of alternative swings already kind of in our repertoire, and explicitly teaching some of those and letting people know that they can come up with their own, and that communicating with their fellow dancers about what they feel comfortable with is a great way to build connection and build trust. I think that, yeah, there's a real opportunity there. For other figures, I think it's going to have to be a lot of really careful watching of the floor to see what people are getting the first time and what needs to be walked again, what needs to be broken down into smaller pieces.
Yeah, for sure. Lisa, go ahead.
Yeah, Ben, that's it, especially about the swing. And I think that's an opportunity for us as callers to say, I mean, this is great. Joanna, I love this series already. It's the first one. And I just learned something that as a caller, I can say, if you're getting dizzy, here's an alternative. If you're getting dizzy, try a walking swing. It's really satisfying. Here's what it looks like. So in other words, empower your dancers and have the organizers empower the dancers so that the dancers can take care of themselves.
Kalia, go ahead. Oh, sorry, Ben.
I was just gonna say, I love in a beginner lesson demonstrating how you can swing with one person walking and one person doing a bow step, and you can still be giving weight and you can still be connecting, and letting people see that there are options and there are alternatives.
And thinking in terms of English, those of us who have been dancing online or calling online, we've all gotten used to dancing in our offices or our living rooms and dodging around the couch. Getting back into a dance hall where there's space, being able to fill a large space, I think we're going to have to recalibrate how we move just a little bit and get used to that. It's possible that the first day we put a bunch of English dancers into a large space, they'll just, magically fill the space. It could certainly happen, but I think getting used to dancing in a space that's actually appropriate for it, that'll take a little bit of time.
Cis, what do you think? What do you think is going to be the most challenging figure or dance concept that needs some attention once we're back?
I actually don't know. I would pass that on to someone else and I'll ruminate.
I think one of you used this phrase, Ben. I think it was you. It was the giving weight phrase. Somebody said in the comments, one of the things that has been happening for those who have been dancing with the Zoom dances is there are a lot of people dancing by their lonesome in their houses, right? And so just the way we balance with another person, give weight, have connection, that's something that I think might need some reinforcement and will be interesting to think about.
Since we're all callers here, I'd like to encourage you to consider the phrase positive tension as opposed to give weight. Give weight often makes people become broomsticks in a swing. So positive tension, which is a phrase I got from Stuart Kenny when he teaches bass. And he said, hey, I watched you teach that swing. I got a better phrase for you. Positive tension, same thing as in an Alaman. Thank you all for listening.
All right, more learning.
Consider it stolen.
Great. So other things that will be challenging, the whole difference between people dancing on their own in their homes, dancing in couples, that's another social issue that might have to be addressed to get people used to dancing with other people. Do you think there are any obstacles or learning things? Here's the thing that I think about as a caller. When you're dancing on Zoom, you never have to be late because there's nobody to dance around. So you're always there on time. What do we have to do to actually get people to fill out phrases and dance the figure as you taught it versus just getting there on time? So lots of stuff to think about there too.
And just like there was before the pandemic, getting people to do all of that. The question about what's going to change versus dancing online, since there's so few of my, at least local community, that have gotten indoctrinated in the online dancing world, I'm having to think back a year and a half ago about what would I like to change, or encourage or reteach or whatever to what they used to do then, because most of them have not been part of the online world. So that's just me having to relearn myself what I would like them to go home with or dance with.
Yeah, I think, I mean, a lot of what we're talking about isn't really anything new, right? It's going back to the basics of what does it mean to come together and connect and have a good time and support each other through dance. And that's what our job as callers is to support people in reaching that place. And there are some extra challenges, but the answers are ideally the things that we have been doing or should have been doing or have been trying to do all along.
And one of the interesting things right now is that as callers, there's more permission, and that's tacit permission, not spoken permission from the dancers. Maybe it is explicit permission from the organizers to actually take the time to teach some of these things, to give a few more reminders. And that's an interesting moment to take advantage of too. Lisa, what did you say? This golden 2 to 3 months that we have, right? So really taking advantage of that. So are there some other things other than a lot of the things that have been mentioned that you want to take the time as a caller to work on? So as a caller, I have lots of pet peeves, right? Things that I really want to work on in this period of time. So as a caller, what do you think you might start working on most or first once we're back to it?
Repertoire. As I said earlier,
Mm-hmm.
yikes, that stuff is rusty. And I look forward to that. Wow. And I also look forward to seeing what I'm rusty on in front of the mic. So paying attention, having that part of you that's paying attention saying, oh, wow, you just taught that really terribly. Note to self. What happened? See, to me, I always think that's a good thing. That's a great opportunity because it keeps me interested in being a caller. So I'm sure I'll have plenty of those moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what else? What are some of the things that you want to do? Or how about habits that you might want to try to break dancers of once we're back? You think?
Oh, Brooke just listed a great one. Bad helping habits. Kalia, take it away.
Oh yeah, I mean, this kind of goes back to the social engineering end of things. You know, how do we re-envision our dance communities, and how do we help move them from where they've been to where we want to get them? Again, we're going to have to do conversations with the organizers, the managers, maybe get a few key dancers involved in this. The thing that I always really want to see is dance communities that are really united in wanting to give beginning dancers, brand new dancers, a good dance experience. And our Sebastopol dance is pretty good about that, about really taking care of new folks who come in the door and making sure they've got partners. There are other local dances that I've been to. It's more of an issue, honestly, in contra dancing, where I see new dancers on the sidelines, and there's only so much you can do from the mic while you're working. So this is kind of a cultural shift that I would really like to see, is that a really core thing is we take care of our new dancers. And so that's something I would love to see a better emphasis on, and just trying to pay attention to when I'm making assumptions about what everybody ought to know, because maybe they don't, and I don't want to put people in the position of going, oh, I don't know that thing. So I just trying to pay more attention to my own assumptions. And I'm also definitely going to be working more on transitioning to positional terminology, not necessarily for everything, but if it's you know, it'll be happening. It's a process.
And in terms of my local group and perhaps others that I'm involved with, I would really love to get sort of like some of the things Ben has been talking about, refocus our local dance group on being a community. Because we had sort of fallen into the, I don't know what you'd call it. All right, we're putting on a production and they are consumers of that production. And they, you know, they paid their money and by golly, they want to be entertained. That sort of approach to come into the dance rather than coming out to see their friends and enjoy an evening together and take care of and welcome new people. And that's totally, you know, it's not a buy-in across the board. But I would love the focus of our dance to reemerge as a community of people who love to dance, rather than a bunch of consumers of dance that is being produced for them. And that is a, you know, setting the tone sort of thing that organizers and callers together are going to be required to make happen.
I think that's a wonderful distinction. I love how you expressed that.
For me, I think one of the sort of persistent challenges in a good way of being a caller is finding that balance between letting people have a good time and teaching them, not to sound condescending, but teaching them how to do it right. And we as callers, you know, have lots of strong opinions about that. And of course, you know, we know best that if you do it right, you'll ultimately have a better time. But no one likes being talked down to. And there is often a little bit of a tension there between, you know, I want to teach you this safety tip or this style tip that I think will help the whole dance community, but I need your buy-in, because otherwise you're just going to get mad at me that I'm wasting time before you can get back to dancing. So there's really careful attention that you have to pay to that relationship and that trust and that buy-in between the caller and the dancers, so that everyone's needs get met.
So, Ben, something you just said brought a question to my mind, and that is, given this gap of time, some of us have been doing calling on Zoom, some of us haven't. What do we have to actually rebuild trust and buy-in from the dancers? Are they going to remember these, you know, prestigious roles we've had in the dance community, or do we have to do something else? Like, do we have to start from scratch, and how do we do that? So what do you think? Are the dancers, are they going to pay attention to us because we're callers, or do we have to do some work to make that happen?
Again, I think the organizer's role is really important because it's always top down. I mean, I remember being hired for a weekend and told, well, the organizers want squares, but the dancers don't. And I said, well, what have you done to prepare them? Well, they hadn't done anything. So they put the onus on me, which was interesting. And I had a great conversation with them later and said, this has got to be in your PR right from the get-go, that you love squares, that squares are going to be great, or whatever else you want the community to embrace. It has to also come from the organizers and be modeled by the organizers. And I think Ben mentioned, and Kalia mentioned also, enlisting those dance angels to say, hey, would you be part of this larger conversation? It doesn't have to just be a conversation with the organizers. It could be with the folks who have already bought into your series. Have a conversation with them and say, you could do it over Zoom. What would you like to see happen? Can you help us make it happen?
So let's sort of poke at that a little bit more, this connection. We've talked about it over and over and over again between the callers and organizers and all of this communication that has to take place. How do you do it? What do you suggest? And how much time should there be to communicate before dances actually start again? So what do you think about that? Kalia, how about you?
We're in sort of an easy position for that because our dance is a little bit geographically isolated from the rest of the Bay Area, a little bit. And the dance organizers are good friends of mine. So, you know, we can just chat about this. And we have a pretty strong core of regular dancers as well. But I haven't really, we've talked about the nuts and bolts. How do we do this? You know, what are the mechanics of starting the dance back up? But I haven't had the chat with them, and now I really want to. How do we want to make this grow? What do we want to do with it? We have this moment, and sorry, I keep sliding down in my chair. You know, what do we want to do with this opportunity? I'm going to call them as soon as I'm off here. In places where there are a whole bunch of dances in one big metro area, it's going to be a little, I think you're going to have a larger group of people that need to be in that conversation because the community is a bit more diffuse. And of course, within a situation like that, there's room for different flavor. I mean, every dance series has its own vibe, and that's certainly not going to change. But there's this inflection point, this moment when we can bend the vibe in one direction or another.
So, Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the pandemic has brought a lot of disruption of many kinds, but one thing, I mean, a lot of people have moved. I've moved to a new state, and my local dances are ones that I am less familiar with now. And so patterns of, you know, who are your local organizers? Who are your local colors? Who are your local musicians? That's not going to be entirely the same as it was before. And so that's going to have a big impact on the process of booking callers and musicians for dances. And even that, I mean, just thinking about booking, because like many of us, I've worn many hats, and I've done performer booking, and often you're booking many months in advance. How is that rhythm going? And I had something else to say, and it's gone. Let someone else talk.
So, Ben, something you were saying brought something to mind for me, and this is true if you're a caller who's traveling to a place you're less familiar with. But even in your home dance community, you may think you know your home dance community, but in fact, during the pandemic, that landscape may have changed as well, because there are going to be people who don't come back at all. There are going to be people who have moved away that you didn't know. And there may be an influx of new dancers. We always hope there will be, but lots of things will have changed. So as a caller, I think part of the job that you may not be able to anticipate very well is, again, adapting, like we've been saying throughout. But again, to me, that speaks to the connection between callers and organizers and their communities during this time, to help learn who's there, what's the same, what's different, and how can they help prepare callers for that new landscape. So that's something to think about. And I'm just wondering, for those of you who feel like you have a home dance community, have you been in touch with organizers about this? And have the organizers stayed in touch with the home dance community, with the dancers during this time, so they can learn what's going on, that kind of thing. So what's happening for you guys at home like that? Cis, go ahead.
I'm in an unusual position because I actually happen to be president of our steering committee for the local group. And we've met once a month on Zoom, but we as a committee, but the dance group has not been particularly connected. We've had a few picnics in the park kind of experiences just to get together, but I have no idea what our community is going to look like. We had a live sort of private party dance that was announced on our Facebook page. So a number of people that came out were familiar faces. And so I know that there is at least a core of folks that are interested in returning. But I actually don't even know if the steering committee is on the same page, even though I'm on it, of what I would like to see about the direction that our dance community takes in these, golden 3 months or whatever we get when we finally come back. We're still focused on, well, where are we going to dance? And, our dance hall is not open. Where can we, when are we going to dance? What's it going to, all that stuff, as opposed to making use of this time to decide how we want to return. So even though I'm one of the organizers, I can't even speak to how our organizers feel.
And it just gave me another idea, which I had 6 months ago. Name tags. It's a great time to have name tags. Back when we thought we'd be dancing in masks, and we were all making fun of, well, where do I put my name tag on my mask? That could still be a possibility. But boy, I hope, and we as callers can ask, does your community have name tags? Would you mind having them the night I come to call?
Especially useful if you've forgotten everybody's name during that time when we haven't been dancing together. Oh, we don't like to say that. Oh, I forgot. I'm just going to pop in to say that the chat has been very active, and from what I've caught, it's great, and many of you are answering each other's questions, which I appreciate. If you do have a question for the panel, if you wouldn't mind retyping it so I can find it easily, that would be delightful, or something else that hasn't been discussed that we can bring up. That would be great. So I'm going to take a second to look at the chat here to see what's going on.
Can I just also point out, Bob Isaacs also made a good point, and I think a few other people in the chat, that this reentry does not have a start date. So we have a rolling reentry. And one thing I'm proud about in the Boston area is that often organizer people are sitting at the gate, and they will know who's coming in, who's brand new. And if there's a slew of new folks, someone will go up to the caller and say, they're here, the busload of singles. And I love that, because then I can make an announcement to the community, hey, go ask one of these people to dance and get them involved. Well, I hadn't thought about it till tonight, but maybe the same thing is going to be true with, oh my gosh, we have 10 people we haven't seen, even though we've been dancing for 5 months. Can you make sure that you do something to help them feel welcome? They already know how to dance, but boy, they're going to be the deer in the headlights, and they're going to feel, I can imagine, wow, this has been going on without me. And maybe that's something communities could talk about, is understanding that there are different thresholds of safety and comfort. And how do you stay in touch with your community once you have started dancing? I think that's really important. I mean, some people have floated the idea, could there be a Zoom cam on the band? Can't put it on the dancers because of privacy issues. But if the caller and band don't mind being on Zoom, could they be on for a couple of dances so that folks who aren't there can still be a part of their community? I don't know. I bet there's some great ideas out there about how to help other people feel included, even though they're not ready to come back.
And I think that's an important segue, and I'd love to get your take on this. People have been talking about this concept of hybrid dances. Now, that could mean lots of different things, but one thing that it does mean as callers is that we might have this concept of doing both in person and Zoom. What do you think the questions are that we have to ask about this concept, and how might it work? What do you think? Kalia, I'm going to call on you. You've been doing lots and lots of calling on Zoom. You have your series. So what do you think, thinking about your series in particular, if you like, and the future of it, what's going to happen? Is there a hybrid world for you?
We've certainly talked about it. And for those of you who have not been to our Sebastopol English dance, I hope we'll see you someday there. But it's a small hall, and I'm talking about, having the camera on just one line or just one corner of the dance. It's hard to really isolate one segment of the hall. And the more I think about doing a fully hybrid dance where you've got a live set in the hall, plus the caller is also somehow working with the dancers on Zoom, the less able I am to figure out how to make that successful for both sides. And Sharon Green and I have talked about this. We haven't really come up with a solid answer yet. I am gradually drifting more toward we get the live dances going, maybe with a band cam periodically, or with a little Zoom corner so people can visit at the break. But I think trying to simultaneously call for a live room and a Zoom crowd is going to make for a lot of caller stress.
Yeah, Cis, go ahead.
Yeah, we've in the online dances that are still going on, and I know Kalia has experienced this, we're starting to see pods of people dancing on Zoom, trying to do the dances as called. And that already adds caller stress because, of course, we were working on choreography over all this time that was specifically useful for one or two people at a time. And some of the adaptations of the English dances were aimed at that, no progression, whatever. We're only talking to the ones, that sort of thing. And Contra, we just threw the whole thing out and started over and made up dances that really had no, progression, no line, just people. Anyway, so trying to do that now is a challenge. Once we're all back, like you said, maybe having the one thing that I've heard people opine about for after the pandemic is over, when dancing starts, some people that have been doing online dancing are thrilled with it, partly because they don't live in a community that has a dance. They're too far away, or they, there are those who can't physically dance, but that are just, not able to get to a dance, or don't have a local caller, or don't have a local band. And if there was a way to focus on the band and the caller, where the caller was not going to watch them, not worrying about them, but they could perhaps have their own little group of 6 or 8 dancing in someone's home, doing what they think the caller is saying. And that is a kind of hybrid that I could see happening. But that means your hall has to have good Wi-Fi, and you have to have the whole Zoom setup and the whole which is questionable.
And it sort of reiterates the point that we've been saying about how callers and organizers need to have conversations with each other about what is going to happen in the world of hybrid at this here dance tonight, if anything, just so you know things like that ahead of time so you can be prepared.
And maybe instead of trying to hybridize it, you actually have a Zoom event geared towards those people who haven't been able to come back, a social event, and actually say that, hey, there's some of you we haven't seen, but we'd love to chat with you. Come join our Zoom.
Mm-hmm. So it could be that groups do change their focus. Maybe instead of having only in-person events, there are online events that continue to happen, whether or not there's a dancing component, for sure. So here's another question. This has come in the chat, and I think because all of you are traveling callers, you go places to call as well. What kinds of questions will you ask the organizers about their communities going into it now that you might not have asked about before? There's a lot of concern about safety issues given the pandemic? What's kind of, this is a little bit of a personal question, so just feel free to not answer about your comfort zone if you don't want to, but are there any other questions you're going to ask about that will ensure your physical safety, health, and well-being, thinking about masking, vaccinations, anything else, things that you're really concerned about as a caller?
Well, I would want to know, is this the very first dance your community is having? And that changes things. That actually gives me a bit more latitude because I can help direct what I want to have happen. Oh, this is the third dance. Great. What have you learned?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What else? What are things that you're thinking about? Would you just accept any and all gigs, or maybe not? And what do you think?
I want to know what's behind Lisa's shake of the head there, but I agree that knowing the more information, the better. Knowing where the community is, what their expectations are, I can hopefully adapt to a lot of different scenarios, but what I don't want is to walk in assuming one thing and then find out that, actually they've agreed that they're all not going to touch each other while dancing. Like that I need to know in advance.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we used to kind of take for granted heading into a gig. And I don't think there's any normal about this anymore. And we have to ask all the questions. What do you want to see in the program? Who do you expect to be there? What kind of crowd? The vaccination question's a biggie. How do you want the evening structured? What kind of pacing? Every community is coming into this with a different goal, a different set of abilities, different levels of what this of experience for what this last year has been. So yeah, I think there's just going to have to be a long conversation before you say, yeah, fine, I'll take the gig.
People have been saying great things in the chat, thinking about, will I have my own microphone cover? Should you, as a caller, be purchasing your own microphone cover? Things like that. What is the ventilation like in your hall, if that's of concern to you? How big is the hall? Are people going to be really close to each other? Will people be far apart? What will that be? So there's this whole series of questions. I know that many organizers have been asking dancers about their comfort level with all of the same, but as callers, we may have to add these things to our list of questions that we have for organizers as well. And for organizers out there, it's a great thing to add to your list to just communicate ahead of time with any visiting callers, especially that you have from out of town, but even with your group of local callers, to not make any assumptions about who knows what, to make sure everybody is on the same page.
And fortunately, these are conversations that can be initiated by the callers or by the organizers, right? And I think that one of the things that we're going to have to become comfortable with is asking the questions that we think maybe someone might expect we should already know. Like, forget those expectations, just ask the questions.
Yeah, good. Well, we are nearing the end of our session. It's been wonderful to talk to all of you and hear your thoughts. So many things that we're learning, lots of things to think about, and so interesting to hear that so many of the things we're working on that we assume dancers will think and need, they're actually the same things as before, right? It's just an added opportunity to focus on it. The communication needs between callers and organizers, those were there before too. We just have more of an excuse to have these conversations. And Ben, yes, as you said, anybody can initiate these conversations, and I hope that they do. So before we close out, I just want to make a few announcements about things that are coming up, both in the online world and in the in-person world. And panelists, if you have any events that you want to advertise, I'll give you a moment to say that. From the CDSS side of things, first of all, this is again the beginning of our new series called Common Time, and I hope you'll join us each and every single third Monday at 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific, and all the time zones in between. Our July program will be on Monday, July 19th, and that will feature singer Sarah Lynch Thomason talking about her Songs That Speak series with Jeremy Carter Gordon from the singing group Windborne. That's going to be a great conversation. In August, we're going to talk to a group of educators about getting our kind of folk dance education into that world, and our September program will be a cultural equity conversation, and we'll have more information about all of these on our website, and Crispin is going to post some links in the chat to make sure you know how to get to Common Time, and we'll be opening our registration for the July program later this week, so I hope to see you all there. Lots of other things you can register for, like in-person camps. There are still spaces at a whole bunch of our CDSS weeks, and we'd love to see you fill some of those spaces at Harmony Week, Early Music Week, Unplugged, Dance Music and Spice at Cavell, and what's the other one? Maybe that's it. Crispin will list all of those as well, so please do register for camp. If you're not able to or not yet comfortable going to in-person camp, we are having an online camp week that will be July 18th through 25th, and that's going to be a collection of different kinds of events. Some of them you might experience at camp, some of them very different, including family dance, a dance for all, some singing workshops, clogging workshops, all kinds of things are going on, and we will open registration for that week next week. So things going on there. And we're also offering a bunch of different courses over the summer and through the fall. Starting at the very end of July and going through August, we're going to have some different choreography courses, one focusing on contra dancing, one focusing on English dancing. Bob Isaacs will lead our sessions about contra dancing, and Scott Higgs will lead our sessions about English dance choreography. So look for that. We'll have some music workshops coming up in the fall, and also some more sessions for callers later on in the year. So lots of things going on there. And Kalia wanted to remind us about her Odd Sundays series. Kalia, do you want to mention what's happening and when?
I certainly do. Up until very recently, it has been every first, third, and fifth Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific time for socializing, 1:30 to 2:30 dancing. If you are interested in the series, email Sharon at bacds.org for information. Our schedule is likely to be changing as the summer progresses and the Sebastopol dance starts re-emerging from its burrow. So pay attention to your emails when you get them. Thank you.
Thanks. Cis, what's going on with Atlanta Disc Dance? What are the next events we should be thinking about?
We used to be every Friday, but up until the beginning of this month, we decided to alternate weeks with the dance at Glen Echo on Fridays. There's this. It used to be people would come from our dance straight to their dance because it started after. But we've decided that it's going to be every other week, which is a little harder to program. It's not first and third; it's every other week. So I always have to check my calendar. So we are. We do advertise on the CDSS online events lists to keep track of when and which and who's calling and who's playing. So I would encourage you to check for the ATL Disc Dance on the CDSS online events. And we're also doing second and fourth Monday English dances as part of our event. And that is continuing. It is second and fourth, not alternating. So that's it. This week it's Glen Echo. Thank you for pointing that out. So that would mean we must be next week.
If it's Tuesday, it must be.
Exactly. It must be Belgium. There you go.
Wonderful.
One more thing that I could mention is tomorrow night I am also part of a panel, as is another one of our organizers, Seth, Tepfer and several other folks on a 5 things talk about how we got through the pandemic. Online pioneers, I believe we are referred to as. So if you want to come and join us, that would be delightful tomorrow night. Oh yes, that's right. Kalia is calling for the Atlanta Disc Dance on June 28th, Monday. So enough.
Great. Thank you for those. A reminder again before we go that we will be sending a follow-up email to all of you who attended, and we will do things like send you a link to the recording that you're very welcome to share with anybody who was unable to attend this presentation. We will send you an evaluation and again ask you what other topics would you like us to feature on Common Time or in another online or in-person program. And there will also be, everybody's favorite thing, a link to donate. One of the things that's very important to me is that all of our panelists, all of our participants tonight, and in future editions of Common Time, we do compensate them for their time. And the only way we can do that is with your donations. So thanks to all of you who did donate to support this series, and hopefully others of you will feel able to do that. Before we end tonight, and I will keep checking to see if there are last questions, but here's a question for all of our panelists to consider before we go. What is the dance you are most looking forward to dancing once we resume in person? So think about that you have approximately 20 seconds. All right, Lisa, you're ready, go.
Chorus jig, let's just do it. No walkthrough, go. Thank you.
Right now, okay, we're ready. Cis.
A really fun, fast waltz with a great partner.
Ben, how about you?
David Kaner's The Baby Rose.
Right, Kalia.
I keep coming back to just basics like Midnight Ramble. There's nothing fancy about it, but everybody, it's an all together kind of rompy stompy. Yeah, just all together. Man, I miss it.
Well, I hope all of us will be able to do all of those dances really soon, hopefully together. And thanks again to our panelists, Cis Hinkle, Kalia Kliban, Lisa Greenleaf, and Ben Sachs-Hamilton. It's been wonderful to chat with all of you. Thank you so much for attending this program. Thank you for this lively chat conversation that's been going on the whole time. Yes, you are able to save the chat to your very own computer. There should be an option to do that if you open the chat. We'll stick around for a few more minutes. You can unmute yourself, say hello to everybody. If you have a question you want to shout out, you're welcome to do that. And we'll stick around. Thank you so much.